The first sound was not a scream. It was a breath. Long, uneven, wet, as if drawn through a narrow throat that no longer remembered how air was supposed to move. The recording begins with that breath, followed by 30 seconds of silence. No movement, no voices, only the faint hum of electrical interference and the distant tick of a wall clock. According to church records, the tape was started at 9:42 p.m. The exorcism would end before 9:47. At the time, no one in the room understood why. The house stood at the edge of a fading industrial town, where factories had closed and families stayed, because leaving required money they no longer had. It was a narrow two-story structure with warped siding and a roof that sagged slightly toward the back, as if the building itself were tired. Neighbors later said the house always seemed darker than the others, even during summer afternoons, as though light avoided it out of habit. The family had lived there for 9 years without incident. The girl's name was Mara. She was 16. Quiet. Academically gifted. According to her teachers, she was polite to the point of invisibility. She did not drink, did not experiment with drugs, did not skip school. Her social media presence consisted mostly of shared articles and photographs of old books, annotated with brief, thoughtful captions. There was nothing in her background that suggested instability. The first change was subtle enough to be dismissed. Mara began waking during the night, not screaming, not panicked. She would simply sit up in bed, eyes open, breathing shallowly, staring at nothing. Her mother noticed it first, when she passed the bedroom door at 2 a.m. and saw the light from the hallway reflected in her daughter's eyes. When asked the next morning, Mara said she did not remember waking. She said she was tired. Within weeks, her grades began to slip. Assignments were incomplete. Tests left unfinished. Answers trailing off mid-sentence. Teachers reported that she would pause during class, pen hovering above the paper, as if listening to something only she could hear. At home, she stopped eating with the family. She claimed food tasted wrong. Medical records show that Mara was taken to a general practitioner first. Blood tests were normal. Thyroid levels within range. No signs of infection. The doctor suggested stress, hormonal changes, possibly insomnia. She was prescribed a mild sleep aid. It made things worse. After taking the medication, Mara began speaking in her sleep. Not murmuring. Not fragmented words. Full sentences, spoken clearly, with measured pauses between phrases. Her father recorded one instance on his phone. In the audio, Mara's voice is flat, almost bored. She thinks she is alone, she says. There is a pause. She never is. When her parents confronted her with the recording, Mara became visibly confused. She insisted the voice sounded like hers, but said she had never spoken those words. She laughed once briefly, then stopped as if realizing laughter was inappropriate. A neurological evaluation followed. An EEG showed irregular activity, but nothing definitive. No seizure disorder, no tumor. A psychiatrist suggested dissociative episodes, possibly linked to anxiety. Therapy was recommended. Medication adjusted. None of it slowed the progression. The next phase began with language. Mara started using words her parents did not recognize. Not slang. Not mispronunciations. Words with complex consonant clusters and unfamiliar rhythms. When asked what they meant, she would hesitate, brow furrowing, then say she did not know where they came from. She began correcting people's grammar, not casually, precisely, even correcting her English teacher, citing archaic rules that were no longer in use. When challenged, she provided references, texts she claimed to have read, though no copies were found in a school library or local university archives. Her therapist noted an unusual effect during sessions. Mara was calm, almost detached, even when discussing distressing topics. She described her emotions as distant, as if observed through glass. When asked if she ever felt afraid, she answered honestly. No, she said, but something else does. The first physical incident occurred on a Thursday evening. Mara's mother heard a loud sound from upstairs, like furniture being dragged across the floor. When she reached the bedroom, she dresser overturned. The mirror was shattered. Mara stood barefoot among the glass, uncut, staring at the wall. Her hands were clenched so tightly her nails drew blood from her palms. When her mother spoke her name, Mara turned slowly. Her pupils were dilated, almost swallowing the color of her eyes. "You shouldn't touch that," she said. Her voice was deeper. Not dramatically so, just enough to feel wrong. "Touch what?" her mother asked. Mara looked at the broken mirror. "He watches through reflections," she said. "You let him see too much." Paramedics were called. Mara resisted them with a strength that did not match her frame, for adults struggled to restrain her. One later reported that her grip felt locked, not squeezing, but rigid, like steel bars wrapped in skin. At the hospital, she calmed abruptly. She asked where she was. She cried when told what had happened. The admitting physician noted something unusual. During the physical exam, Mara's heart rate dropped suddenly, then stabilized at an abnormally low level for several minutes. She did not lose consciousness. She did not appear distressed. When asked if she felt dizzy, she smiled faintly. "No," she said. "He doesn't like bright places." It was after this incident that the family contacted the church. They did not do so immediately. They were hesitant. The father later stated that he did not believe in possession. He believed in psychology, in neurology, in trauma responses. But he also believed in patterns, and what he was seeing no longer fit any explanation he trusted. The parish priest visited the house first. According to his written statement, he expected hysteria, suggestion, possibly a family projecting religious meaning onto mental illness. He described Mara as reserved, articulate, and unusually attentive during their initial meeting. She answered his questions politely. She did not react to prayer. She did not react to holy water. When he asked if she felt any discomfort in the house, she shook her head. "This place is quiet," she said. "He doesn't mind it." The priest asked who she meant. Mara frowned, as if surprised. "No one," she said. As he stood to leave, the priest noticed something carved into the underside of the dining table. The markings were shallow, made with something sharp. They formed interlocking shapes, not letters, but deliberate, repeating symbols. When asked about them, Mara said she had not noticed. Her mother insisted they had not been there before. The priest photographed the markings and sent them to the diocesan office. He did not label them as occult symbols. He simply wrote that they were unidentified. 3 days later, Mara stopped sleeping entirely. She lay in bed with her eyes open, unmoving, for hours at a time. When her parents tried to intervene, she asked them not to interrupt. "He's almost finished," she said. "Finished with what?" She did not answer. The second priest arrived on a Monday. He was older, with decades of pastoral experience. He had been involved in cases of alleged possession before, though none formally recognized. He brought with him a small notebook, a recorder, and a copy of the Roman ritual. He began with observation. For the first hour, he asked questions unrelated to faith, about school, about books, about her favorite places. Mara answered thoughtfully, sometimes smiling. She asked him questions in return. She wanted to know how long he had been a priest, why he chose it, whether he ever doubted. "Of course," he said. She nodded. "So do we," she replied. The pronoun did not go unnoticed. When prayer began, the change was immediate. Mara's posture stiffened. Her breathing slowed. Her gaze fixed on a point just above the priest's head. The temperature in the room dropped, according to all present. Not dramatically, just enough to be felt. When the priest spoke the first invitation, Mara exhaled sharply through her nose. "That name means nothing here," she said. The priest continued. Her lips curled slightly. "You're not authorized," she said. "They didn't tell you everything." The priest paused. He asked who they were. Mara's eyes shifted, focusing on him fully now. "You know," she said, "the ones who pretend this is rare." The session ended early. In his report, the priest noted several red flags: aversion to sacred language, knowledge of ecclesiastical hierarchy beyond lay education, and a distinct change in vocal tone during prayer. He recommended escalation. Permission was granted for a formal exorcism. It was scheduled for the following Friday. The room chosen was the basement. It was the only space large enough, and the only one without reflective surfaces. Mirrors had been removed from the house entirely by then. Even polished metal had been covered. Mara was brought down willingly. She sat in the chair, without being restrained. The attending priest introduced himself formally, and began the rite in Latin. For the first 2 minutes, nothing happened. Mara's breathing remained steady. Her eyes were closed. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. At 9:44 p.m., she opened her eyes. The recorder captured the sound of a slow inhale, followed by a voice that did not match the girl's age, pitch, or cadence. "You took your time," it said. The priest continued. Mara's head tilted slightly to the side. "That won't work," the voice said. "But you already know that." The priest asked the entity to identify itself. There was a pause. Not resistance. Consideration. The voice laughed softly, not mocking, but almost indulgent. "You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answered," it said. The priest persisted. At 9:46 p.m., Mara's lips moved again. This time, when the voice spoke, it did not use Latin or English. It spoke a name, a single word, articulated with deliberate clarity, each syllable pressed into the air as if carved. Witnesses later said the sound of it made their teeth ache. The recorder spiked, then cut to static. And in that moment, before anyone could react, Mara smiled. Not the girl's smile. Something else. Something that had been waiting to be known. The name did not echo. It did not linger in the room the way a shout or a cry might. It settled instead, heavy and precise, as if it had always been there and had only just been noticed. For several seconds after it was spoken, no one moved. The attending priest later wrote that his first thought was not fear, but certainty. Not certainty of belief, but certainty that something irreversible had just occurred. He described it as the moment you realize a door has closed behind you and there is no handle on your side. Mara's smile faded almost immediately. Her face relaxed, eyes drifting shut, as though the effort of speaking had exhausted her. Her breathing returned to its earlier rhythm. Slow, controlled, untroubled. The assistant priest reached for the recorder. It was no longer functioning. The tape had warped inside the casing, despite being brand new. When removed, it showed signs of heat exposure. Edges curled, surface discolored. No source of heat was identified in the room. The temperature, according to the digital thermometer placed near the chair, had dropped another 2 degrees during the incident. The attending priest did not stop the rite. He later stated that stopping felt impossible, not because of pressure, but because of an overwhelming sense that interruption would be interpreted as consent. He resumed the Latin prayers. Mara's body responded immediately. Her shoulders drew back sharply, spine arching against the chair. Her hands clenched, fingers curling inward with enough force that the tendons stood out beneath the skin. Her feet pressed flat against the floor, heels lifting slightly, as though resisting an upward pull. Her eyes opened again. They did not focus. The priest commanded the entity to be silent. Mara laughed. The sound came from her throat, but it did not carry her voice. It was layered, as though 2 tones were occupying the same space, one riding beneath the other. "You heard it," the voice said. "Now you want to pretend you didn't." The priest demanded the entity identify itself again, according to protocol. The smile returned. "No," it said. "Names are invitations. You already opened the door." At this point, the assistant priest attempted to intervene, reading a passage from the Gospel. He later reported that the words felt thick in his mouth, difficult to form, as though his tongue were swollen. He stumbled over syllables he had spoken hundreds of times before. Mara turned her head toward him. "Careful," the voice said. "You're not protected the way he is." The assistant priest fell silent. Sweat began to form along Mara's hairline, though the room was cold. Her breathing grew uneven, not labored, but strained, as if her lungs were adjusting to a different pattern of use. The attending priest moved closer. He placed his hand on Mara's forehead. Her skin was cold, not cool, cold, as if blood had stopped circulating beneath it. When he spoke the next invocation, Mara's body jerked violently forward. The chair scraped against the concrete floor, leaving a shallow groove. The restraints, added quietly after the initial incident, tightened around her wrists and ankles. Her voice changed again. It became quieter, more focused. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," it said. "This isn't infestation. This is residency." The priest asked how long it had been there. Mara's lips pressed together, then parted. "Since before she noticed," the voice said. "Since before you would have believed her." The priest asked what it wanted. The answer came without hesitation. To be acknowledged. The room seemed to contract around the word. The attending priest felt a pressure in his ears, similar to the sensation of descending rapidly in altitude. The assistant priest later reported nausea and dizziness at this point, though he remained conscious. The prayers continued. With each invocation, Mara's reactions intensified. Her muscles tensed and released in irregular patterns. Her head snapped from side to side, neck twisting at angles that made the observers instinctively look away. Her voice alternated between silence and sudden, sharp utterances, short phrases, fragments of language that did not match any known dialect. At one point, she spoke a sequence of words that the attending priest recognized from his theological training. Not the words themselves, but their structure. The cadence matched that of ancient liturgical texts no longer in use, predating standardized ritual language. He did not respond to them. He continued the rite. The entity grew irritated. "You think this hurts," it said. "This is nothing." Mara's body lifted slightly from the chair. Not levitation. Her spine straightened, shoulders pulling back so forcefully that the chair tipped onto its rear legs. For a moment, she balanced there, feet still touching the floor, the angle unnatural and sustained. The assistant priest shouted for help. The attending priest did not look away. He commanded the entity to release its hold. Mara's mouth opened wide, too wide. Her jaw strained visibly, tendons standing out as if on the verge of tearing. Her tongue pressed flat against the lower lip, trembling. When she spoke, the voice was no longer singular. It layered, multiple tones, overlapping, harmonizing in a way that should not have been possible from one human throat. "We were invited," it said. The priest demanded to know by whom. There was a pause. The pause stretched. For several seconds, the room was filled only with the sound of Mara's breathing and the faint hum of the overhead light. Then she spoke again. "She asked," the voice said. The priest froze. He asked who? Mara's eyes rolled upward, showing mostly white. "Herself," it said. The temperature dropped again. Frost formed along the edges of the concrete floor, thin and uneven, dissipating almost as quickly as it appeared. The attending priest later admitted that this was the moment his certainty wavered. Not his faith, but his understanding of the situation. Self-invitation was not a concept addressed in the ritual. Consent, even implicit, complicated everything. He pressed on. He invoked authority. He invoked command. Mara screamed. The sound was raw, unfiltered pain. It cut through the layered voices, through the ritual language, through the basement walls. Upstairs, Mara's mother collapsed to her knees, hands over her ears, sobbing. The scream did not stop. It sustained itself beyond what should have been possible. 30 seconds. 40. A full minute. When it ended, Mara slumped forward. Her head hung low. Her hair fell across her face, obscuring her expression. The restraints loosened slightly as her body relaxed. The attending priest approached cautiously. He spoke her name. There was no response. He reached out to lift her chin. Before his fingers made contact, Mara's head snapped up. Her eyes locked onto his. They were fully black now. No visible scara. No reflection. Just depth. "You don't get to undo this," the voice said calmly. "You don't get to pretend you didn't hear it." The priest stepped back. He demanded the entity leave. The voice laughed again. This time, there was no indulgence in it. Only certainty. "You asked for my name," it said. "That means you accept my presence." The priest shook his head. He denied the claim. He continued the rite with renewed urgency. Mara's body convulsed. Her back arched violently, lifting her shoulders off the chair entirely. The restraints strained. One of the leather straps began to tear, fibers snapping audibly. The assistant priest moved to help restrain her. The attending priest shouted for him to stop. At that moment, Mara spoke again. This time, the words were in clear, unaccented English. "I can see him," she said. The voice was hers. Thin. Terrified. The priest called her name again. She blinked rapidly, eyes darting around the room. "He's standing behind you," she whispered. The priest did not turn. He knew better. Mara began to cry. Tears streamed down her face, cutting clean paths through the sweat on her skin. "He keeps telling me it's too late," she said. "He says you already listened." Her breathing became erratic. The priest spoke directly to her now, not the entity. He told her to focus on his voice. He told her she was not alone. She shook her head. "He's not talking to you anymore," she said. "He's talking to me." The basement light flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went out. The room plunged into darkness. For several seconds, no one spoke. In the dark, something moved. Not footsteps. Not a body. A shift in pressure, as though the air itself were rearranging. Mara laughed softly. Not the entity. Her. A thin, broken sound. "He's showing me things," she said. The attending priest struck a match. The flame flared, then steadied. In the dim light, Mara's face was visible again. Her eyes were normal, red-rimmed, wet with tears. Her expression was one of awe and terror intertwined. The priest asked what she saw. She hesitated, then spoke. "He says his name was never meant to be spoken," she said. "He says it changes the shape of things." The flame guttered. The priest commanded the entity to depart. The voice did not answer. Mara's mouth opened again. This time, when the sound emerged, it was not a word. It was a low vibration, a tone. It resonated through the basement, through the concrete, through bone and teeth. The attending priest felt it in his chest, a pressure that made breathing difficult. The match went out. Darkness returned. And in that darkness, something whispered. Not from Mara, from everywhere. The assistant priest screamed. The attending priest felt hands on his shoulders. Cold. Unyielding. He could not move. Mara spoke one last time before the recording equipment failed entirely. Her voice was steady, resigned. "He says you shouldn't have asked." Then the basement door slammed shut on its own, hard enough to crack the frame. And above them, the house fell silent. The silence that followed was not empty. It pressed inward, dense and deliberate, as though sound itself had been pushed out to make room for something else. The attending priest did not know how long he stood there, pinned in place by hands he could not see. There was no pain in the grip, no crushing force. Only certainty, the kind that does not threaten because it does not need to. When the pressure finally released, it happened all at once. He staggered forward, nearly falling. His lungs burned as he drew in air, unaware until that moment that he had stopped breathing. The assistant priest was on the floor, curled on his side, arms wrapped around his head, rocking slightly. The basement light flickered back on, not gradually. Instantly, Mara was still in the chair. Her restraints hung loose, torn nearly through. Her head was bowed. Her hair concealed her face. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath shallow and uneven. The attending priest approached slowly. He did not speak. He had learned, in the span of minutes, that speech carried consequences. He knelt in front of her. "Mara," he said quietly. Her head lifted. Her eyes were hers again. Fully, she looked at him with naked fear. "It didn't leave," she said. The priest felt his stomach drop. He told her to stay calm. He told her to focus on her breathing. She shook her head. "That's not how it works," she said. "It's not like that." He asked her to explain. She swallowed. "It's not inside me the way you think," she said. "It's layered." The priest asked what she meant. She hesitated, then spoke carefully, as if choosing words that might break if handled too roughly. It's like when you hear two songs at once, she said. And you think you're listening to one, but the other one has always been there. You just didn't notice it until someone pointed it out. The priest stood. He ordered the assistant priest to leave the basement. The man did not respond. He repeated the command. Still nothing. The attending priest placed a hand on the assistant's shoulder. The moment he made contact, the assistant jerked violently and screamed. Not in terror, in rage. He twisted onto his back, eyes wide, face flushed, veins standing out along his neck. You think you can just walk away? He shouted. The voice was his. The words were not. The attending priest stepped back. The assistant laughed, then stopped abruptly. His expression changed. Confusion replaced anger. He blinked rapidly, breathing hard. What happened? He asked. The attending priest did not answer. He helped the man to his feet and guided him up the basement stairs. He did not allow him to look back. Mara watched them go. She did not call out. She did not cry. She only followed with her eyes until the door closed. When they were alone again, she spoke. It's learning, she said. The priest turned toward her. Learning what? He asked. How much it can touch, she replied. The attending priest made a decision then, one that would later be questioned. He ended the rite, not because he believed the danger had passed, but because he recognized escalation when he saw it. Whatever had occurred when the name was spoken had altered the structure of the event. Continuing without understanding that alteration felt reckless. He documented everything. The warped tape, the temperature fluctuations, the language, the name. He sealed his notes and submitted them to the diocesan office with a recommendation for immediate review. The response came the next morning. He was instructed not to attempt further exorcism. Not temporarily. Indefinitely. No explanation was given. Mara was moved to a private medical facility. Officially, her condition was classified as acute psychosis with dissociative features. She was placed under observation. Sedatives were administered. Antipsychotics adjusted. They had little effect. Mara remained lucid. Too lucid. Doctors noted that her vitals stabilized at unusual baselines. Her resting heart rate hovered consistently below normal. Her body temperature remained slightly reduced. EEG readings showed persistent irregular patterns, but none that matched known disorders. She spoke rarely. When she did, it was to ask precise questions. How long does a word stay alive after you say it? Can you forget a sound once you understood it? Do you believe silence can be damaged? Staff members reported feeling uneasy around her, not threatened, observed. One nurse requested reassignment after waking from a dream in which Mara stood at the foot of her bed, silently mouthing words she could not hear. Security cameras showed Mara asleep in her room at the time. 3 days after the exorcism, the attending priest was summoned to the hospital. He was not told why. When he arrived, he was escorted to a consultation room. 2 men he did not recognize were waiting. They wore no clerical attire, no identifying badges. They had his notes. They asked him to recount the moment the name was spoken. He did. They asked him to repeat the name. He refused. They did not insist. Instead, they asked what he felt when he heard it. The priest struggled to answer. Recognition, he said finally. Not of the word, of the act. They nodded. One of the men spoke. That name does not belong to a singular entity, he said. It's closer to a designation. The priest asked what that meant. It marks a function, the man replied. Not an identity. They told him the case was no longer under diocesan authority. They told him to step back. He asked about Mara. They exchanged a glance. He's stable, one said. The priest did not believe him. That night, Mara disappeared. There was no sign of forced exit, no alarm triggered, no footage of her leaving. Her bed was empty, the restraints in use, the window closed. The only anomaly was found in the audio monitoring system installed in her room. For exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds, the system recorded a low-frequency hum, too low to be consciously perceived, too consistent to be environmental noise. Embedded within it was a pattern, not a voice, a structure. When analyzed later, It showed repeating intervals matching the syllabic cadence of the names spoken during the exorcism. The hospital did not report her missing immediately. They hesitated. When authorities were notified, the story was sanitized. A troubled patient wandered off. Search efforts were brief. The case was closed quietly. The attending priest resigned 2 months later. He cited health reasons. He did not perform another rite. Years passed.
The town changed.
The house at the edge of it remained vacant. Neighbors reported lights on at night. Voices. A low sound, like distant chanting, vibrating through the ground. Urban explorers eventually broke in. They found markings carved into the walls. Not symbols. Words. Names. Most were crossed out. One was not. The recording of the exorcism resurfaced online briefly before being removed. Listeners reported headaches, no sleep, a sense of being watched. The original tape has never been recovered. The attending priest keeps one memory from that night. Not the voice, not the darkness, but the moment, just before the name was spoken, when Mara looked at him with something like apology, as if she already knew what would happen, as if the question had never been whether the demon would give its name, but whether anyone should have asked.